The Zyvar Dominion had conquered countless worlds. Their fleets, black monoliths of destruction, drifted above Earth like heralds of an inevitable fate. From the bridge of the dominance, General HFY Wrath observed the blue planet with a mixture of indifference and mild curiosity. Humanity had resisted longer than expected, but to him, they were nothing more than a footnote in the Dominion's conquest. He clasped his taloned hands behind his back, his mandibles twitching. Reports from the first wave had arrived. Earth's defenses were falling, city by city, continent by continent. The human armies, though stubborn, were crumbling beneath Zyvar technology. Plasma bombardments had reduced infrastructure to molten ruins, and Zyvar war-mechs patrolled streets littered with burning vehicles. 3 days, he had estimated. 3 days, and humanity would be another addition to the Dominion's growing empire. Supreme General, resistance remains in isolated pockets, one of his commanders reported. The humans fight hard, but their technology is inferior. Victory is inevitable. HFY Wrath barely acknowledged the report. This was how it always went. The Zyvar were superior in every metric. Warfare was science to them, calculated, precise, predictable. Humanity, for all its bravado, was simply another species to be subjugated. But then came the first anomaly. An outpost on the outskirts of New Bastion, a key human military stronghold, was destroyed. Not by orbital strikes or mechanized infantry, but by a small group of human soldiers using nothing but explosives and sheer audacity. They had somehow breached a Zyvar garrison, set fire to supply caches, and executed the commanding officer before vanishing. It was an aberration, a minor disruption. Yet, when HFY Wrath reviewed the footage, something unsettled him. The humans had no energy weapons, no shielding, no enhancements. Yet they fought as if they had nothing to lose. The garrison had been filled with genetically enhanced Zyvar warriors, creatures engineered for war. And still they had fallen. He dismissed it. Isolated events were inevitable in war. Then it happened again. Another unit disappeared in the forests near Eurasia, their final transmission filled with confusion and panic. Ghosts, they had called the humans. Their armor had been found later, empty, stripped, and arranged in a mockery of a Zyvar victory display. It wasn't just resistance. It was a statement. HFY Wrath's claws tapped against the cold metal of his command console. The humans weren't fighting like any species he had encountered. They didn't just resist, they adapted. They studied their enemies, exploited weaknesses, and struck with terrifying precision. The reports grew stranger. A Zyvar battalion had engaged human forces in the ruins of a city. Expecting an easy battle, the Zyvar advanced, only to be met with makeshift traps, snipers in ruined buildings, and civilians hurling Molotovs at Zyvar war machines. It was chaos. Uncontrolled, illogical chaos. The Dominion didn't operate in chaos. The Zyvar were creatures of strategy, discipline, and structure. But the humans? They thrived in it. HFY Wrath finally leaned forward, his posture shifting from detached observer to something else. Something he had not felt in centuries. A vague sense of unease. Another report flashed across the holoscreen. A single human operative had infiltrated a Zyvar supply depot, planted explosives, and escaped undetected. The footage showed him sprinting through fire and plasma barrages, using nothing but speed, cover, and a staggering refusal to die. How? More reports flooded in. The Zyvar were losing soldiers at an alarming rate. Not in large-scale battles, but in relentless, unpredictable attacks. Convoys vanished in the night. Officers were found executed. Their bodies left with notes written in human languages, mocking the invaders. Then came the moment that shattered HFY Wrath's certainty. A Zyvar war mech, a towering behemoth of alloy and plasma, was taken down by a group of human infantry armed with nothing but scavenged weapons and explosives. The footage showed them crawling under the machine, planting charges, and detonating them at just the right moment, toppling the war machine like a wounded beast. It was impossible. HFY Wrath's claws tightened around the edge of his command console. His subordinates waited for his orders, but he said nothing. For the first time in his long, decorated career, he had no words. His species had conquered hundreds of worlds, each falling like dominoes before Zyvar supremacy. No enemy had ever fought with such reckless defiance. No species had looked extinction in the eye and grinned. And yet, here stood humanity, outnumbered, outgunned, and utterly unwilling to surrender. HFY Wrath inhaled slowly. A cold certainty settled in his chest. This would not be over in 3 days. This war had only just begun. The Zyvar Dominion had never faced an enemy like this before. Their fleets had razed planets, crushed rebellions, and imposed their rule on countless species. Yet, against humanity, something was different. Their initial invasion had gone as planned. Orbital bombardments softened key military centers. Mechanized infantry advanced through shattered cities, and dominance seemed inevitable. But then, the humans adapted. Reports poured in of small squads taking out entire Zyvar patrols. They used terrain, misdirection, and sheer aggression in ways the Dominion had never encountered. There was no predictable pattern, no logical tactics the Zyvar could counter. One moment, a convoy was advancing unopposed. The next, it was engulfed in fire, its escorts disabled by carefully placed explosives. HFY Wrath studied every engagement report, seeking a flaw in the human resistance. There had to be one. No species could fight against the Dominion indefinitely. Yet, the more he analyzed, the more he realized this was no conventional war. The Zyvar fought with overwhelming force. Humans fought with creativity, turning every disadvantage into a weapon. A ruined city became a maze of ambush points. Wreckage became cover. Even defeat was a tool, as retreating soldiers lured the Zyvar into carefully prepared kill zones. His officers dismissed the resistance as desperation. HFY Wrath was not so sure. The latest report detailed an operation in what had once been a human industrial zone. A Zyvar outpost had gone silent. When reinforcements arrived, they found the garrison wiped out. Not from a full-scale assault, but from precision strikes, sabotage, and psychological warfare. Surveillance footage showed shadows moving through the ruins, striking with ruthless efficiency, disappearing before the Zyvar could respond. One by one, the Dominion's footholds weakened. A power station was overloaded, frying equipment critical to the invasion's logistics. A Zyvar officer was assassinated in his own quarters. His body discovered with a message carved into his armor. "Not so invincible now, are you?" HFY Wrath's mandibles clenched. He had expected defiance. He had not expected this level of calculated, unrelenting defiance. Then came an event that shook the entire war effort. A Zyvar command center, a heavily fortified stronghold designed to withstand orbital strikes, was destroyed from within. The humans had somehow infiltrated it, bypassed security, and turned the Dominion's own weapons against them. They hadn't just destroyed it, they had made a statement. The footage showed a lone human standing before the wreckage, holding a Zyvar officer's severed helm aloft before vanishing into the smoke. HFY Wrath could no longer ignore it. These were not just survivors clinging to hope. This was an enemy that refused to be conquered. For the first time, he questioned whether the Zyvar had made a mistake. HFY Wrath stood in silence, talons flexing against the cold metal of his command console. Every calculation, every prediction, every assumption about this war had been wrong. Humanity was not breaking. If anything, they were becoming more dangerous. The Zyvar had expected a conventional fight, one where superior technology and numbers would guarantee victory. Instead, they faced an enemy that adapted faster than any species they had ever encountered. Every countermeasure the Dominion deployed was rendered useless within days. New strategies crumbled under the relentless creativity of human resistance. The latest battle report confirmed it. A heavily fortified Zyvar command post, one designed to withstand full-scale assaults, had been overrun by a force 1/10 its size. The humans had struck under cover of darkness, using stolen Zyvar weapons against their own troops. Security systems had been bypassed, guards eliminated with terrifying precision. By the time reinforcements arrived, the base was nothing but smoldering wreckage. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. The Dominion had conquered worlds with ease, crushing uprisings before they could form. Yet here, Against an enemy vastly outnumbered and outgunned, they were losing ground. Interrogations yielded nothing. Captured humans gave no valuable intelligence. Some remained silent. Others mocked their captors, laughing through split lips and broken bones. One simply grinned, whispering, "You don't win a war by fighting fair." HFY Wrath knew then that the Dominion had underestimated humanity in the worst way possible. They had assumed fear would break them, but fear only fueled them. The Zyvar had expected an easy conquest. Instead, they had awakened something they did not know how to stop. HFY Wrath reviewed the latest tactical projections, but the numbers no longer mattered. The Dominion still held orbital superiority, still had more soldiers, more war machines, more firepower. Yet none of it seemed to make a difference. Every attempt to reestablish control ended the same way. Failure. Entire battalions disappeared without a trace. Supply lines were disrupted by unseen saboteurs. Elite Zyvar warriors, bred for war, were found dead in the ruins of once thriving human cities. Not from superior firepower, but from sheer tactical ingenuity. The humans never fought head-on. They struck when least expected, vanishing before retaliation was possible. HFY Wrath's officers demanded harsher measures. Scorched earth tactics, total annihilation. But even those strategies had limits. They could destroy cities, but they could not destroy the will of the humans. They fought in the wreckage, turning destruction into an advantage. The final report arrived, the one that changed everything. The Dominion had attempted to crush the largest human stronghold in a massive offensive. Every available warship had been deployed. Thousands of Zyvar troops marched into battle. The outcome should have been certain. But the moment the attack began, the humans sprung a trap so devastating, it shattered any illusion of Zyvar dominance. They had lured the invasion force in, allowing the Zyvar to believe they had the upper hand. Then, with a coordinated precision that defied logic, they struck. Buildings collapsed on advancing legions. Improvised explosives detonated in perfect synchronization. An entire regiment was wiped out in minutes. And when the smoke cleared, the message was clear. The Zyvar had never been the hunters in this war. They were the prey. HFY Wrath finally understood. This was not a war of conquest. This was survival at its purest form. Humanity had never fought for dominance. They had fought because they refused to be erased. And that, he realized, made them the most terrifying enemy the Zyvar had ever faced. The retreat order came from HFY Wrath himself, a command that no Zyvar commander had ever issued. The Dominion had never retreated, not once in their long history of conquest. Yet here they were, pulling back from a world they had deemed insignificant. The humans had made it clear Earth would never bow. Every attempt to subjugate the planet had not only failed but humiliated the Dominion. This was no longer a war. It was a costly lesson in underestimation. HFY Wrath's war council was in shambles. His subordinates demanded explanations, searching for someone to blame. How could a single species, lacking the technological advancements of the Zyvar, repel their empire? The answers were always the same. Humanity was not stronger. They were not better equipped. They simply refused to lose. The final battle had driven the point home. The Zyvar had committed their most elite forces, deploying their most advanced weapons in a coordinated strike to crush human resistance. Every contingency had been accounted for, or so they thought. But the humans had known. Somehow they always knew. They had used the Dominion's arrogance against them. While the Zyvar forces advanced, the humans sabotaged their own infrastructure to bait the Dominion into overextending. Critical choke points became death traps. Fields of seemingly untouched terrain were riddled with improvised mines. Even the air itself became an enemy, as the humans unleashed chemical countermeasures to disable Zyvar equipment. It was chaos, the kind of chaos the Dominion had never faced. The humans had no clear front line, no standard formations. They struck from every direction, hitting weak points with unrelenting precision. Zyvar forces couldn't regroup, couldn't adapt fast enough. And then came the final blow, a simultaneous counterstrike across every occupied region. The humans coordinated it perfectly, using stolen Zyvar technology to turn their own communication systems against them. Troops were ambushed, supply lines severed, command posts obliterated. The retreat order wasn't a decision, it was a necessity. To stay any longer would have meant total annihilation. As the last Zyvar ship broke orbit, HFY stared at the blue-green planet below, a bitter realization settling in. The Zyvar Dominion had not just been defeated, they had been humbled. For centuries, the Dominion had believed they were unstoppable, that no species could match their might. But Earth had proved otherwise. Humanity didn't need superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They fought with something far more dangerous, an unyielding will to survive. And as the stars carried him far from the planet, HFY knew one thing for certain. The Dominion would never return to Earth. They couldn't afford to.